Hello again. Until the system for deporting asylum seekers to Africa is established, the British Home Office is doing its best with what accommodation it can find in this country. I don't know if they're deliberately trying to make life unpleasant for refugees and asylum seekers in hope that they'll go back across the English Channel of their own volition, but the latest place these people will be compelled to stay is Grimsby, in the north of England. My wife is from Grimsby and I've spent a lot of time there with her parents and so on. It is one of those towns like nearby Cleethorpes which raises a laugh whenever it is mentioned. There is something intrinsically funny about such places, and the names are often used humorously to suggest the ends of the earth. If you say some famous singer is reduced to playing in a show at the end of Cleethorpes Pier, that is funny, as is the very idea of living in Grimsby. The word Grimsby makes people chuckle for some reason. I have no idea really why this should be, but believe me, Grimsby is a pretty out of the way place. It is literally at the end of the line because people do not pass through it on their way anywhere. The only reason they go to Grimsby is if they've got business there. In the 1980s, when BT was trying to reduce the number of telephonists at their exchanges in central London, they hit upon a way of avoiding redundancy payments. They set up an office in Grimsby and told staff that they would not be sacked, but that if they wished to continue being employed by BT, they would have to relocate to Grimsby. It worked every day, every time. People always handed in their notice rather than move from London to Grimsby. I have an idea that something similar might be behind the Home Office contracting to take over the St James Hotel in the centre of town. It is the biggest hotel in Grimsby with 125 rooms, all with ensuite bathrooms, flat streets, flat screen televisions and so on. On Monday, the owner of the hotel, Chorus, suddenly announced that it was being closed with immediate effect, as they had entered into a contract with the government. Some people had already booked the place for weddings and christenings and so on, but they had their bookings cancelled. The Home Office is planning to ship asylum seekers to Grimsby and house them in the hotel, which is causing widespread anger in the town. There really is nothing for anybody to do in Grimsby, you see. If they fill up the St James Hotel with hundreds of refugees, all those people will be able to do is hang around the shopping centre. Grimsby is, by the way, almost 100% white English. It is one of the whitest places in England. What the reaction to this move will be there is anybody's guess, because at the moment efforts are being made to invigorate the city centre, and I can't see how closing down the biggest hotel in this way will help with that aim. I understand that the same stunt is being pulled in other English towns where there are nothing but English people living. The Lincolnshire town of Boston, which is not all that far from Grimsby, was until a few years ago a pleasant, slightly dull, thoroughly English town. It is now, believe it or not, the murder capital of England, with violence a regular event. Local people are furious about the destruction of their town, and I have an idea that the people of Grimsby are likely to be none too pleased about the beginning of the same process in their own town. I hope viewers have observed how the use of the armed forces has done nothing so far to stem the flow of all these types across the channel. It was never intended to. The truth is we have a government which actually wants as many foreigners as they can lay their hands on to enter our country. There is not one person in the cabinet who seems to have the faintest idea how people feel about the process. I strongly suspect that none of them have even been to Grimsby, let alone care about those living there. It's a couple of 100 miles from London and in the north, and that's all they need to know. Grimsby, by the way, was one of those red wall towns that fell to the Tories at the last election, but I can't quite see the Conservatives managing to hang on to it with tricks like this being played. It seems to me as though the gloves are off now, and there's no longer any real pretence about wishing to reduce the number of people coming to our country. Many viewers must have seen Boris Johnson in India wearing, of all unlikely things, a turban and various other exotic items of clothing. He's gone there to arrange for hundreds of thousands of new immigrants to come to Britain from India, and like so many politicians, couldn't resist the temptation to show how culturally sensitive he is by putting on fancy dress. I do not think there will be a town or even village unaffected by this madness in another 5 or 10 years at most. Nobody was consulted about it, nobody chose it, nobody wants it. Yet for some reason all three of the main political parties in Britain are determined that it should be forced upon us regardless. In the description to this video I give a link to a news item about the St James Hotel in Grimsby.